How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ayin Hey, Daf 85 of Masechta Sanhedrin. Friends, yo friends. Well, alright, here's the dealio. Today we start the 9th parak of Masechta Sanhedrin, parak Eluhein Hanisrofin. Now, let me tell you, Epis. The first two daf of Eluhein Hanisrofin is Yevomis, straight up, hardcore Yevomis. Now, I remember the first time I learned the first two daf of Eluhein Hanisrofin was probably like 15-20 years ago. I think it was most likely my first experience ever with Yevomis, and I knew from then that Yevomis was not for me. So, here is a deep dive into Yevomis, Shtigl Sanhedrin Yevomis over here. Good luck to everybody. This is going to be for today and tomorrow, and then that's it. Here we go. Yevomis. Sanhedrin Yevomis. Says the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, and we're going to do a whole bunch as well on Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. That's just I think the best way. There isn't really a good way to cut it. So we're just going to have to suck it up as much as we can. I think I'd like to get kind of halfway through Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. It's not going to be the easiest daf. Here we go. Ve'eluhein hanisrofin, these are those who get burnt. Haba al isha u vita. Okay, a person who sleeps with isha u vita. Now, what does isha u vita mean? It literally just means a woman and her daughter. Is it talking about your wife and her daughter? Is it talking about your mother-in-law? Is it talking about your mother-in-law and her mother? Who are these? Who's the mother? Who's the daughter over here? If we're talking about right, and we're saying that, well, we kill both of them. Well, what, we're going to kill your wife if you sleep with your mother-in-law? Why? What did your wife do? All right. And as we know, baskoin shezinso, right? A baskoin who's married, let's say, and then she has been with somebody else. She has an affair, so that is bisreife. All right. Now, yesh b'chal isha uvita. Now, included in isha uvita is also bito, his daughter, uvas bito, and his daughter's daughter, vas beno, and his son's daughter. All those are also bisreifa. Uvas ishto, also his wife's daughter, uvas bito, and his wife's daughter's daughter, uvas beno, and his wife's son's daughter. And I guess we're talking about these are not with her. Okay. Well, it could technically. Well, I think it's actually a shayla. Maybe if it's with. I think it's actually. Is that even like? Was that like a shayla somewhere? I don't know. Was that actually because bas? You could theoretically have bas bin right. You could theoretically have bas bito, hers from like a different marriage and his from like a different marriage, potentially, and right. And then there's also bito manusaso, which is like a different thing where they're not even married. Anyways. Where are we? Uvas bino, uvas ishto, uvas bita, uvas bino. Chamoso, his mother-in-law, ve'em chamoso, his mother-in-law's mother, ve'em chomev, and his father-in-law's mother. Wow, this is exciting stuff. Wait, where are okay. I feel like it was pointed out somewhere that there was like a shayla of like, oh, was it even there, maybe? Where... Anyways, I feel like it came up somewhere where it's like, wait, well, how do you actually know, like, if, like, their daughters together? Because maybe it's just, like, her daughter and then his daughter. What about the daughter they have together? Everything ends up being learnt out together somehow. Chever, Yevomis. Okay. Yeah, anyways, I think maybe it comes up tomorrow. I don't know. I think it comes up somewhere. Okay. Says the Gemara, Haba al isha shenosa bita loy katoni. Okay, it doesn't say that if somebody sleeps with the woman whose daughter he married. It's not talking about his mother-in-law, because that would be Haba al isha shenosa bita. If he sleeps with the woman whose daughter he's married to. So it's not talking about his mother-in-law, because it doesn't say that. El haba al isha uvita. Was saying that if somebody sleeps with a woman and her daughter, implying that both of them are asur. and I guess that both of them you'd be chayiv sreifa for, and then they would both be killed as well. So clearly it's not talking about your wife here, because what did your wife do? She's your wife. That's cool. So who are we talking about? Your mother-in-law and her mother. So clearly you're married to a woman, and then you sleep with your wife's mother, and your wife's mother's mother. Well then, that's a problem. You're going to be chayiv sreifa for that, and so will they. Okay, and from the fact that the Mishnah then says, and included in Isha Uvita is also, Bito and Bas Bito and Bas Bino, and like all these other things, implying that so Isha Uvita, which is Chamoso and Aim Chamoso, those apparently are explicitly written in the Torah. So it says those in the Torah, and then we include from them these other things, Bito, Bas Bito, etc. So again, Michlad Tarvayu Ksivi Behedra, implying that both of those, Chamoso and Aim Chamoso, are explicitly written in the Torah. Vanach Midrasha Asya, and then the others are then included for Sreifa from some kind of a drasha from Chamoso and Aim Chamoso. This is machlokas that we're going to see tomorrow. Machlokas Abaye and Rava, but basically, according to it's based on a machlokas between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva about how to understand the word eshen. Anyways, basically, according to Abaye, in the machlokas of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that the pasuk of Beishisvu Oso ve'Esen, right? I think that's the pasuk. What is it? What does it say? Right? Is it not? Yeah. Come on. Yeah, Oso ve'Esen. Where's that daled? Isha shayikach es isha ve'sima zima Beishisvu Oso ve'Esen. So, according to Abaye, according to Rabbi Akiva, that pasuk includes both mother-in-law and her mother. So I understand. Okay, so therefore the Mishnah, which is talking about mother-in-law and her mother, would be, according to Abaye, would be Rabbi Akiva. But according to Rava, he says that neither Rabbi Yishmael nor Rabbi Akiva would say that pasuk is referring to your mother-in-law and her mother. Well then, if that's the case, then who's the author of the Mishnah? Right? Because the Mishnah is saying that the pasuk is talking about mother-in-law and her mother, but according to Rava, the pasuk is not talking about that. It's only talking about your mother-in-law. Both according to Rabbi Shmuel and according to Rabbi Akiva. So who's the author of our Mishnah? So Rava would say that the author of our Mishnah, no, you'd have to change the Mishnah to be saying that it's only talking about the mother-in-law, not your mother-in-law's mother. So now, it's really inside. So I understand according to Abai, the Amar Mashmos Darshani Kibenayu, that whatever, we'll get there tomorrow, but the machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva is about how to understand the word eshen in the pasuk, whatever. So Masnis and Mani Rabbi Akiva. Okay, so according to Abaye, the author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, who says that both mother-in-law and mother-in-law's mother are included in the pasuk. But according to Rave, the Amar Chamosu la'achar Misa Ika Benayu, that he says the machlokas between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva is basically the pasuk is only talking about your mother-in-law. The machlokas between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva is just about would you be chayiv for sleeping with your mother-in-law after your wife dies. But the pasuk is only talking about mother-in-law. It's not talking about mother-in-law's mother. So Masnisa Money, then who's the author of our Mishnah? Because our Mishnah is saying that the pasuk is talking about mother-in-law and her mother. Yet according to Rava, no, it's not. The pasuk is only talking about mother-in-law. Chaver Yivamis. Amalach Rave will say to you, Tni Habal Isha Shenosa Bita. So Rava says, well, you would have to therefore explain that the pasuk is talking about Isha Shenosa Bita, your mother-in-law, right? The woman whose daughter you are married to, not her mother as well. Sanhedrin Yivamis. Okay. Yesh Bichlal Isha Uvita. So included in Isha Uvita is Chamoso, Ve'em Chamoso, Ve'em Chomiv. Okay, it's your mother-in-law, your mother-in-law's mother, and your mother-in-law's father. So Abaye, according to Abaye, so the Mishnah, right? So when it says Isha Uvita, it's talking about your mother-in-law and her mother. So then when we say Yesh Bechlal, your mother-in-law and her mother, your mother-in-law, her mother, and your father-in-law's mother. Well, we already know your mother-in-law and her mother. So the Chiddush is for your father-in-law's mother. So the Abaye, according to Abaye, according to Abaye, since we had to say, it's not just your mother-in-law and her mother, but also your father-in-law's mother. So therefore, Taninami, Chamoso v'im Chamoso, so we also said mother-in-law and mother-in-law's mother, even though we didn't need to, right? Meaning, because if you look at the Mishnah, it says Ve'elu enan nisrafin abal isha uvita, and that's talking about your mother-in-law and her mother. And then it says Yesh b'chal isha uvita, bito vaz bina. Wait, what? Wait, where are we? Yesh b'chal isha uvita. All right, exactly. And at the end it says chamoso ve'em chamov, right? And also your mother-in-law and her mother, which we already know because that's isha uvita. But then we added eim chamev. So because we had to add eim chamev, so we also added chamoso and eim chamoso. Okay, fine. Sanhedrin vomis. Now, according to Rava, who says that all we know from the pasuk is, right, he says, Isha shenosa bita, i.e. only chamoso. Well, therefore, since it had to add aim chamoso and aim chamev, so it also added chamoso. I did the kabbai lemisna, aim chamoso, aim chamev, aim chamoso, tani nami chamoso. So it also taught chamoso. Sanhedrin vomis. Minani, how do we know this stuff? The Tanur, one of the rabbis taught, Ish ashirikach es isha ve'es ima. Okay, so now, there's two psukim that we're basically going to be looking at, I'd say today. Yeah, I think we could say that. There's basically two psukim that we're going to be looking at today. One is the pasuk with the onesh, which is sreifa, and then there's the other pasuk that has the azhara, the warning. Now, the pasuk with the punishment includes different relations than the pasuk with the warning. Okay, so let's read the two psukim. So I'm just reading the psukim now. So the pasuk with the punishment says, "V'ish asher yikach es isha v'esima," a person who takes a woman and her mother. Zima hi, it's zima ba'ish yisifu osu v'esem v'losia zima b'sochachim. Givaldi. 1 second, let me see something. Yeah, right. Chaf Yudalin, that's chaf. Yeah, okay. So we say that if you sleep with a woman and her mother, that is so you chayv sreifa. Now, also important to point out, whereas until now we've been saying that it's talking about your mother-in-law and her mother. In this brisa, however, we've been explaining the Mishnah that way. In this brisa, however, we're taking it literally for now, and therefore the pasuk is saying if you sleep with, I guess, your wife and her mother, we assume that for now it's talking about your wife and her mother. And okay, so sreifa. All right, that is by the punishment, that it's sreifa. Now, I'm going to read the next pasuk, which is the pasuk. It doesn't say anything about the punishment. It just says don't do it. What does it say? Ervas isha uvita lo segale. Don't be with a woman and her daughter. Right. So the previous pasuk was talking about isha ve'ima, kidu, your wife and her mother. Now we're talking about your wife and her daughter. Okay. So isha uvita lo segale as baz bina ves baz bita, and also your her son's daughter and her daughter's daughter. Lo sikach legale sevasa sharei nazimai. Don't be with them. So it's a warning. It's an asara. Don't be with those relations. Okay. So now back in the so now important to point out is that the pasuk by the punishment mentions your wife and her mother. The pasuk by the warning mentions your wife, her daughter, her daughter's daughter, and her son's daughter. Okay. Fine. Now, where are we? So now, Minanimidi, how do we know this stuff? The Tanur Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ish asher yikach es isha ves ima. So the brisa says that the pasuk says that a woman who marries a woman and then he sleeps with her mother, so he's chayev sreifa. Ein li ela isha ve'ima. All I know is a woman and her mother. Bas isha. What about this woman? What about your wife's daughter? Uvaz bita, and your wife's daughter's daughter. Uvaz bina, and your wife's son's daughter. Minayin. How do we know that this is also asur, and that you're also going to be chayiv sreifa for that? Nemar kan zima. Well, it says by sreifa zima, right? What does it say? It says zima hi ba'esh yisrifu also, etc. V'nemar lahalan zima, and it says also by the warning, right? It says shara heina zima hi. So malahalam bita uvaz bina. So just like by the warning, what does it say? It says your wife's daughter and your wife's daughter's daughter, your wife's son's daughter. So afkan. So also by the punishment by sreifa, bita uvaz bina. So it's not just your wife and her mother, but also Right? It's not just your wife and her mother, but also, right, so by Sreifa, it's not just your wife and her mother, but also your wife and her daughter, and her daughter's daughter, and her son's daughter. Okay. Now, how do we know to make boys like girls? And we don't know what this means yet. Right, the Gemara is right after. Sorry, I have to rub my nose. Sorry, Mom. But the Gemara right after this is going to explain to us what this means. But how do we know to make boys like girls? Nemarkan zima, v'nemar lahalon zima. Okay, it says here by Sreifa Zima, and it says by the punishment Zima, by the warning Zima. Malahalan Zcharim Kinikevis, just like over there, boys are like girls. Afkan Zcharim Kinikevis, also here, boys are like girls. Okay, we have to explain what that means. How do we know to make below like above? Again, we're going to have to explain what that means. Nemarkan Zima, it says over here Zima. Malahalan Zima, it says over there Zima. Malahalan Lamata Kilamala, Afkan Lamata Kilamala, just like over there, below is like above. So here also below is like above. Umakan lemaila kilamato, aflon lemaila kilamato. And just like over here, above is like below. Over there, above is like below. We're gonna have to explain what this means. Okay. Now, so there were two things that we have to explain in that brisa. One is what does it mean boys are like girls, and what does it mean that below is like above? Okay, fine. Now, Omer Mar. We just said, how do we know to make boys like girls? Well, what does it mean to make boys like girls? So, ilema bas bino kivas bito. If you're going to say, well, how do we know that we treat the daughter of her son like we treat the daughter of her daughter? Well, that, because it's in the same pasuk, right? The pasuk says, right? The pasuk says, it's in the same place where it says your daughter's daughter, right? Your wife's daughter's daughter. In the same place, it talks about your wife's son's daughter. So that's not really a question. Ella, aim chamiv ke'aim chamoso. Okay, well maybe we're going to say, well then how do we know to make your father-in-law's mother like your mother-in-law's mother? Right? Meaning that we're assuming that your mother-in-law's mother is asur. So then how do we know that your father-in-law's mother is also asur? The thing is, as I made sure to point out, in this brisa, we're not assuming right now that the pasuk by Sreifa of we're not assuming that that's talking about your mother-in-law and your mother-in-law's mother. No, we're just assuming that we're talking about your wife and her mother. Now, that being the case, we don't actually know that your mother-in-law's mother is asur. So therefore, if we're saying how to know Zecharim or Kinekevos, we want to say what's Zecharim? Your father-in-law's mother, Kinekevos, like your mother-in-law's mother, but we don't actually know your mother-in-law's mother yet. Right? So again, Ella, where am I? Yeah, so Ella aim chomiv came chamoso. If we say it's talking about your father-in-law's mother to be like your mother-in-law's mother, but hashta aim chamoso lo kamalon. Well, we haven't yet learned about your mother-in-law's mother. Aim chomiv mehader alos. And how are we saying? Well, how do we know your father-in-law's mother? Well, we learn out your father-in-law's mother from your mother-in-law's mother, but we don't know your mother-in-law's mother yet. So Abaye says Abaye hachi ka'amar. This is what boys like girls are. Is minayin lasos she'er haba mimenu kishe'er haba mimena. How do we know to make the relatives that are coming from the husband like the relatives that are coming from the wife? Right? Meaning, for example, right? We know. Well, let's go by there for a second. Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, fine. She'er haba mimena kishe'er haba mimena. Let's go by there for a second. Nemer kan zima. Well, it says so. It says zima by. What does it say? It says zima by. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fine. It says zima by the. I guess by what is it? Nemer kan zima, which was, and kan was talking about the punishment, right? But nemer lahalan zima, and also says zima. So what this would mean is that it says zima by him. What's him? The pasuk says, "Ervas bas bincha or bas bitcha lesigal ervason ki ervascha heina." That the pasuk says the ervas bas bincha, the erva of your son's daughter, or bas bitcha or your daughter's daughter. lo segala, you shouldn't reveal. So that's talking about, what's that talking about? That's talking about your son's daughter, your daughter's daughter. What's that talking about? It's not talking about a woman that you're married to. It's talking about me'anusaso. If he had a non-marital relation, and I think it might be referring to either ones or mefata, I think, but me'anusaso from a case of ones. So, okay, so how do we know that she'er haba mimenu, so kilu bas bino, right? Well, bito, bas bino me'anusaso. How do we know that would also be streifa, just like bas bita, right? Just like bita and bas bina of your wife. So Zucharim kilu his she'er kinikevos like her she'er. So again, Amar Abaye Ochigam, this one means Minayin laso she'er abba mimenu kisher abba mimena. How do we know to make his bito vas bino kisher abba mimena like her bito vas bino? Nemar lekan zima. Well, it says here by kilu by nikevos by she'er abba mimena. It says zima. Well, really, it says zima by streifa, which. Okay, we have to go right there for a second. V'nemar lahalan zima, and it says zima by bito me'anusaso, right? From anusaso v'chule. But v'ha b'she'er didei lo ksiva be'zima. But the Gemara points out something important, which is that by anusaso it doesn't actually say zima, right? It says ervas bas bincha or bas bitcha lo segale ervason ki ervascha heina. It doesn't say zima there. So on my rove omali Rav Yitzchak bar avudimi ase heina ase zima. Well, actually it's heina and zima, meaning, so by anusaso it says heina, right? Ervas bas bincha or bas bitcha lo segale ervason ki ervascha heina. So it says heina by anusaso, and it also says heina by the warnings by ishto, right? It says ervas isha ovita lo segale es bazmino es bazbita lo sikach legalis ervaso shara heina zimahi. So by the warning it says both heina and zima, and then by the punishment it says zima, right? Zimahi. So it says zima by the punishment. So if we kind of bring that all together, so we say, well, by anusaso, by shera mimenu, it says heina, and by shera mimenu, it says heina, and it also says zima, and it also says zima by streifa. So if we kind of use all of those links together, we could say that, well, shera mimenu is also be streifa. So that's Zecharim kinikefos. We make shera mimenu keshera mimenu. Okay, to say that that shera mimenu is also bisreifa. So now Omer Mar. So we said earlier, Minan lasos lamata kilamala. Okay, we said, how do you know to make below like above? Malamata kilamala. So my lamata kilamala. What does it mean below like above? What does that mean? So ilim bas bino uvas bito kibito. So if we're saying, well, how do we know that your wife's daughter's daughter and your wife's how do you know to make your wife's daughter's daughter and your wife's son's daughter like your wife's daughter? But they come from the same place. They come from the same pasuk, right? The pasuk says, write that, right? Ovita lo sigala as bazbinov as bazbita lo sikach legala sevas shari nezimai, right? So the same pasuk where we learn bas bino and bas bita, we also learn out bita. So Omer Mar minayin lasos lemato ki lemala ki lemalo ilim bas bino bas bito ki bito. So as I just read, if we're saying bas bino bas bito like bita, but ba'adei adad dekasim, they come from the same exact place, so we don't need an extra limud for that. Elo aim chomiv ve'aim chamoso ka chamoso. Okay, so now how do we know that your mother-in-law's mother and your father-in-law's mother are asurim just like your mother-in-law is asura? right? Because again, according to this brisa, we don't know your mother-in-law's mother yet. So how do you know that your mother-in-law's mother and that your father-in-law's mother are asurin, just like your mother-in-law? But that's not limata kilamala. That's limala kilamata. That's above, like below, right? Your mother-in-law's mother is above your mother-in-law, right? It's higher up. It's her mother. Her mother's higher up, like on the family tree, than your mother-in-law is. So, right, so we're saying, how do you know to make limata kilamala? But then we're saying, how do we know to make your mother-in-law's mother and your father-in-law's mother like your mother-in-law? But that's not limata kilamala, that's limala kilamata. Tani limala kilamata. Okay, so just say that. Just say limala kilamata, and it's talking about your mother-in-law's mother and your father-in-law's mother like your mother-in-law. If that's the case. Nemar kan zima v'nemar lahalan zima, but that won't work because we're saying, okay, how do we know that? Well, because by sreifa it says zima, and by the warning it says zima. But the thing is, umahashta ine lo ksiva, zima didu ksiva. So it doesn't say mother-in-law's mother anywhere. We're saying, how do we know that mother-in-law's mother and father-in-law's mother are like your mother-in-law in Bisreifa? Well, it says over there zima, and presumably, and that includes your mother-in-law's mother, your mother-in-law's father, and your father-in-law's mother. Your mother-in-law's mother, your father's mother, and it says zima here also, but in neither of those places does it say anything about your mother-in-law's mother or your mother-in-law's father. So how does zima teach us anything? If we're talking about like, how do you know that bas bina and bas bita and bita are bisreifa. Well, it says zima in both places, and just like over there, it's bita and bas bina. So here also is bita. If it says it in one place, you could apply it to other place, but it doesn't say mother-in-law's mother or father-in-law's mother anywhere. So zima didu kisiva. So how could we say, okay, so it says zima, and therefore we're bringing something over. What are we bringing over? It doesn't say anything. Right? It doesn't say anywhere. Eim chamoso and eim chamev. So Amar Abai says, Abai Achi Kamar, this is what it means. Minayin lasa shloisha doiris limayla kishloisha doiris limata. What it means is, how do we know to make 3 generations above like 3 generations below? That bita uvas bina will be bisreifa, as well as chamoso, eim chamoso, and eim chamev. So nemar lamata zima. Well, it says zima by lamata. It says zima by the warning. Bita bas bina. V'nemar lemala zima. And also it says zima by lemala, by isha v'ima, by the sreifa. Malemata shlosha doris af lemala shlosha doris. So just like by the azhara, by the warning, where it's lemata bita uvas bina, it's 3 generations, right? It's your wife, her daughter's daughter, her son's daughter. It's 3 generations. So also above, we're talking about 3 generations: your wife, her mother, and her mother's mother / your father-in-law's mother. So her father's mother. Okay. Uma ba'onesh also lemata kilamayla, and just like by the punishment, therefore we make lemata kilamayla, right? Because we said zima, which means that by the punishment, lemata by the warning, lemata is kilamayla, right? Ishto bita bas bina. So also by the warning, it is ishto ima, aim ima, and aim ima, and aim of avir. So abazara nami also lemaila ke limata. So also by the warning as well. Wait, what did you say? I don't know. Uma be'onet. Wait, what did I just do? Zima lemata shlosha doris after lemaila shlosha doris. So uma be'onesh also lemata ke lemaila. Oh, okay. And therefore, just like by the onesh, we make lemata ke lemaila. That basically you're chayiv sreifa for the 3 generations below and the 3 generations above. So Nami, also the same thing by Hizhara. Also Lamaila Kilamata, we make the 3 generations above like the 3 generations below, to say that basically both by the punishment and by the warning, we're talking about 3 generations below and 3 generations above. Everything is applied to everything. There's a warning, there's a punishment, 3 generations below, 3 generations above. Okay. Okay. Rav Ashi says, look, you actually don't need, right? We've been switching it around. We're saying, right, how do you know to make, right? We said your mother-in-law's mother and your father-in-law's mother, like your mother-in-law. We said, wait, but that's lamala kilamata, not lamata kilamala. We said, okay, fine, so switch it around, say lamala kilamata. Rav Ashi wants to suggest you don't actually have to switch it around. You can keep it as lamata kilamala. And lamata could still be referring to your mother-in-law's mother and your father-in-law's mother, whereas lamala is referring to your mother-in-law, because lamata just means further away, right? Lamata, it's like further removed. It's lower on the closeness scale. So, kilu, your mother-in-law's mother and your father-in-law's mother are kind of lamata because they're further removed. So how do you know to make lamata kilamala like your mother-in-law who is closer and less removed? Okay, fine. Now, says the... Okay, Zeo. Wow, this is a stickle Sanhedrin vomis. Okay, now we're moving on. We're moving on now. My brain might turn to mush, it might not. Ima hi Em imo asura, afu em imo asura. Oof. Now, Frekti Gemara. So we are now of the understanding that your mother-in-law's mother is asura, right? Your mother-in-law's asura, and her mother is asura. Okay. Now, one's own mother is asura, right? A man's mother is asura, but his mother's mother is a shniyas larais. It's only asur midrabanan. But why don't we say that if we're saying zucharim kinekevis, so why don't we say that just like her mother's, right, just like your wife's mother's mother is asura, is sreifa, so also your own mother's mother is asura midoraisa, not just midivrei sofim. Right? So again, so ima he Aim ima asura, just like your wife's mother's mother, right? Your mother-in-law's mother is asura to you. So who aim ima asura? Let's say that also his own mother's mother is asura midoraisa, not just shnius larayis. Alright, Abai says, Abai Merkad, the pasuk says imcha hi, that but the pasuk says it is your mother. Mishum imo atam chayvo, you only chayiv for your mother. V'yatam chayvo mishum aim imo, you are not chayiv for your mother's mother. Rava Amar, whereas Rava says, wait, you don't even need to get that far. Rava says you don't need a pasuk to teach you, right? We don't need a pasuk to teach that your mother's, that your own mother's mother is only midirabanan kilu, right? We don't need a pasuk to exclude your mother's mother, because I would never think to include it in the first place. How come I wouldn't think to include it in the first place? Well, because it would be impossible. Why would we think to include your mother's mother? Well, because your mother-in-law's mother is asura, therefore your own mother's mother should be asura. But I would never think to say that, because it just wouldn't work. Why would it just not work? Rav Amar bein leman da Amar don mina umina uvein leman da Amar don mina vuki ba'asra lo asra. Because whether you are in the don mina umina camp, or whether you're in the don mina vuki ba'asra camp, it wouldn't work. What are those things? Those things are, right, don mina umina and don mina vuki ba'asra. I think we've seen it before. They are constructs for how to learn Gezeira Shavas, right? You have a Gezeira Shava. For example, in this case, it says Zima in both places, right? It says Zima in both places. So therefore we can learn, right? We say, well, it says Zima in both places, therefore we're just kind of like merging all of the, relations. The thing is there's then the question is then, okay, now for the next step of, okay, so he's saying that just like your mother-in-law's mother is usher, so also your own mother's mother is usher. But now we have to say, okay, now what's the punishment? What's the punishment? Well, if we look at, we're right, don mina umina, that we're learning mother's mother from your mother-in-law's mother. So if we're going to try to figure out what the punishment would be, well, let's have a look at what the punishment is for your mother-in-law's mother, and that's what it would be for your own mother's mother. What's the punishment for your mother-in-law's mother? Sreifa. So what's the punishment for your own mother's mother? Sreifa. That would be don mina umina. Don mina v'uki ba'asra means that, well, we can use the gezer shava of zima just to establish the isser, that just like your mother-in-law's mother is usher, so your own mother's mother is also usher. Now, what would be the punishment? Don't look, no, there you're not going to look at your mother-in-law's mother, you're going to look at your own mother. What's the punishment for your own mother? Skila. So what's the punishment for your mother's mother? Skila. So if you say don mina umina, you would arrive at the conclusion that your mother-in-law's mother, the punishment, that your mother's mother, the punishment would be sreifa, if you say don mina umina. And if you say don mina vuki ba'asa, you would arrive at the conclusion that your mother's mother would be skila. Now, it says Rava, whether you say don mina umina and whether you say don mina vuki ba'asra, we're going to have problems. And because we're going to have problems, the whole thing falls apart, and therefore we would never even begin to suggest that your mother's mother is asura, because you would have to learn it out through the Gzer Shava, but the Gzer Shava would fall apart because there are questions on it, regardless of if you say domino mina or if you say domino vuki ba'asra. So again, Rava Omer says, Rava, bein lemanda Omer domino umina, whether you say domino umina, or bein lemanda Omer domino vuki ba'asra, or whether you say domino vuki ba'asra, lo asya. You can't arrive at the conclusion that your mother's mother is asura. Lemanda Omer domino umina. So if you say domino umina, okay, so we learn from your mother-in-law's mother. From there you learn that your own mother's mother is asura. And mahi ein imo asura, afu nami ein imo asura. Just like your mother-in-law's mother is asura to you, so also your own mother's asura to you. Umina. And then we learn the punishment from your mother-in-law's mother. Mahi b'seifa, just like your mother-in-law's mother is b'seifa. Afu nami b'sreifa, so your own mother's mother is also b'sreifa. But we have all sorts of questions. L'manda Amar Sreifa Chamura, if you hold like Reb Shimon, that Sreifa is more stringent than Skila, well, Ika Lemifrach, you can ask. What can you ask? Well, Malihi Sheken Ima b'Sreifa, Tomar Behu She'ima b'Skila. Well, first of all, I understand why your mother-in-law's mother is b'Sreifa, because your mother-in-law is b'Sreifa. Your mother-in-law is b'Sreifa. Your mother-in-law's mother is b'Sreifa. But your mother is not b'Sreifa. Your mother is b'Skila. So I'm not so convinced that your mother's mother should be b'Sreifa. Your mother-in-law is b'Sreifa. Your mother-in-law's mother is also b'Sreifa. Your mother, though, is b'Skila. I'm not so sure that your mother's mother should be b'Sreifa. More so, imo b'Skila, and I'll ask you even further, if you say that Sreifa is more chomer than Skila, well then it's weird to say that imo is b'Skila, your mother, who's a closer relation, is b'Skila, and yet aim imo, which is a further relation, is b'Sreifa, is a more stringent punishment. That wouldn't make sense. More so, mahi lo chalakta ba bein ima le'aim imo, afhunami lo tachlak ba bein imo le'aim imo. And also, when it comes to your wife's side, so your mother-in-law and your mother-in-law's mother have the same exact punishment. There's no difference. Therefore, I would say that we should be consistent also, simply for consistency's sake, we should be consistent also on his end, to say that just like his mother's b'Skila, his mother-in-law's mother should also be b'Skila. We should be consistent, not to have one b'Skila and one b'Sreifa. And even if you say that Skila is more chamura, like the Chachamim, but still, mehai kusha lo nidonas. We still have this question, the consistency question. Regardless of if Skila is more chamur than Sreifa, or if Sreifa is more chamur than Skila, it doesn't matter. You have the consistency question. That your mother-in-law and your mother-in-law's mother are both the same punishment. So we should say that your mother and your mother's mother should be the same punishment, not one beskila and one bisreifa. And ulamanda amar don mina vuki ba'asra, and even if you say don mina vuki ba'asra, so what does that mean? So mahi aim ima asura afu nami aim ima asura. So we're going to say based on the Gzeir Shava that just like your mother-in-law's mother is asura, so also your mother's mother is asura. Now vuki ba'asra. Now what's the punishment? Well, let's look at your mother. Hasam hu de bisreifa. That okay. So by your mother-in-law's mother it's bisreifa aval hacha, but over here by your mother's mother beskila kedashkechan bima. We look to your mother, and your mother is beskila, so your mother's mother is also beskila. But the madamar sreifa chamura, if you say that sreifa is chamura like Reb Shimon, well then I'll ask, you can ask, ma lehi ashken ima b'sreifa. I understand why your mother-in-law's mother is b'sreifa, because your mother-in-law after all is b'sreifa. That is the most stringent punishment that there is. So if your mother-in-law is bisreifa, so I can understand also why your mother-in-law's mother would be asur. But your mother is not as stringent. It's only beskila. So maybe your mother's mother is excluded. Right? Malahi, after all, your mother-in-law shekain ima bisreifa. Right? Your mother-in-law is bisreifa. So therefore I understand that your mother-in-law's mother is also asur. But tomar behu, will you say by your own mother? Shima beskila, where your mother is only beskila, maybe the isur doesn't extend to your mother's mother. Va'odem more so, who kihi, that he is like her. Mahi lo chalakta ba bein bita le'imima. Well, when it comes to your wife's side, so we make no distinction between bita, her daughter, right? If you sleep with your wife's daughter, so it's sreifa, le'imima, to your mother-in-law's mother. Both are bisreifa, right? Your wife's daughter is bisreifa and your mother-in-law's mother are bisreifa. So afhu, so I should say the same thing on his side. Lo tachlok, don't distinguish bein bito, between his daughter, which is bisreifa, le'eim imo, to his mother's mother, which should be the same thing, which should be sreifa. So how can we say that it's skila? And even if you say that skila is more chamer than sreifa, like the chachamim, mehakushelo nidona. This question remains the consistency question. That just like on your wife's side, your wife's daughter is bisreifa, and your wife's mother's mother is bisreifa. So on your side also, if your daughter is bisreifa, so your mother's mother should also be bisreifa, not biskila. So therefore, we wanted to suggest that just like your mother-in-law's mother is bisreifa, so also, or is asura, so then also your mother's mother should be asura. The thing is, we can't learn that out because you'd have to learn that out from the Gzeir Shava of Zima, and it just wouldn't stand, because whether you say Don Mina or Mina, or whether you say Don Mina Vuki Ba'asra, we have questions. And now for the final push of this daf, Imahu kalaso asura, afi kalaso asura. It's going to be a very similar kind of mahalach here, which is why I'm not stopping yet. I'm just going to push to get through this, just because, just because I don't want to start. We're like in the middle of a flow. I think we should just finish it. Imahu kalaso asura. So his own daughter-in-law is asura. So afi kalas asura. So let's say that his wife's daughter-in-law is asura to him, right? So just like his son's wife, his daughter-in-law is asura, and it's beskila. So let's say his wife has a son from a previous marriage, and that son is married. So basically his wife has a daughter-in-law. That daughter-in-law has no relation to him, to like the guy that we're talking about, right? So that is technically mutter, right? He can marry his wife's daughter-in-law. There's no relation there. I guess if they get divorced, if his wife's son and daughter-in-law get divorced, or if he dies, whatever. But let's say that just like his daughter-in-law is asura, so let's say that her daughter-in-law is asura to him. So again, ma'hu kalas asura, just like his own daughter-in-law is biskila, is asura. So so let's say also his wife, kalasa asura, that his wife's daughter-in-law should be asura to him. When Rabbi says, the pasuk says, Eishes bincha he, well, it says by your daughter-in-law, it says, Eishes bincha he. She is the wife of your son. Mishum Eishes bincha ata mechayvo, v'ata mechayvo mishum eshes bina. You are only chayiv for your own son's wife, not for your wife's son's wife. Okay. Rava Amar, whereas Rava similarly says that we don't need a pasuk to exclude this relation because it would never get off the ground. Why would it never get off the ground? Because bein la man da'amar don mino umino, bein la man da'amar don mino vuki ba'asra, lo asra, it will never get off the ground. La man da'amar don mino umino, because if you say don mino umino, okay, so we're going to say that, well, just like your daughter-in-law is asura, so also your wife's daughter-in-law is asura. But what are we learning? We're learning out the chiddush is your wife's daughter-in-law. So we're basically learning out your wife's daughter-in-law from your daughter-in-law. So if you say don mino umina, so mahu kalasa asura, afina mi kalasa asura. Okay, so to establish the isser, just like your own daughter-in-law is asura, so your wife's daughter-in-law is asura. Okay, umina, and continue to learn out from your own daughter-in-law. Mahu biskila, just like your own daughter-in-law is biskila, afinami biskila, so also your wife's daughter-in-law is biskila. But lemandam skila chamor, if you say that skila is more chamor than sreifa, so you can ask, malehu shekain imo biskila. I understand why his daughter-in-law is asur, because after all, his mother is biskila, which is the most chamor punishment that there is. Tomar behi, what we apply to your wife, she'ima, that her mother, your mother-in-law, is bisreifa, which is not as chamor as skila. So I understand why your daughter-in-law is asura, because after all, your mother is biskila, but her mother is only bisreifa, so maybe her daughter-in-law is not asura. Ve'od, and more so, bita bisreifa, her daughter is bisreifa, v'chalasa biskila. How could it be that her daughter, right, your wife's daughter is bisreifa, and your wife's daughter-in-law is more stringent, is biskila? How does that make sense? So Huba says, well, that isn't really a good question, because the bito bisreifa v'chalosu biskila, because after all, his own daughter is bisreifa, and yet his daughter-in-law is biskila, so that isn't really a good question. Meaning to say that, how could it be that her daughter is bisreifa, and yet her daughter-in-law is biskila? I mean, you find the same thing by him. Okay, elamahu lo chalaktabo ben imo l'chalaso. Okay, but by him, there is no distinction between between his mother and his daughter-in-law. Both are biskila. Well then, so we should say the same thing by your wife. Lo tachlok ba ben ima, between her mother, i.e. your mother-in-law, l'chalasa, to her daughter-in-law. Right? Meaning, just like your mother is biskila and your daughter-in-law is biskila, so then her mother-in-law should have the same punishment as your mother-in-law, i.e. her mother, should have the same punishment as her daughter-in-law. And yet, if you say that her daughter-in-law is biskila, it's different than her mother, which is bisreifa. And even if you say that sreifa is more chamor than skila, mehai kusha lo nidonin. This question, the consistency question, remains, because that's regardless of what's more chamor. The fact of the matter is, your mother is biskila, your daughter-in-law is biskila. There should be consistency between your wife's mother and your wife's daughter-in-law. But if you say domino umina, your wife's mother is bisreifa and your wife's daughter-in-law is biskila. So that's a problem. And according to the opinion, don mina vuki ba'asra, that learn her daughter-in-law from your daughter-in-law, but then after establishing that, say that her daughter-in-law is bisreifa, right? Mahu kalaso asura, afi kalaso asura, that just like your daughter-in-law is asur, so also your wife's daughter-in-law is asura. V'uki ba'asra, but then establish it on your wife's side. Hasam hu dibi skila aval hacha bisreifa, that when it comes to your daughter-in-law, it's biskila, but your wife's daughter-in-law would be bisreifa. Kidash kan be'ima, just like your wife's mother is bisreifa. So if you say that skila is more chomer than sreifa, you can ask ma lehu shken imo biskila. I can understand why his daughter-in-law is asur, because after all, his mother is biskila. His mother is biskila. It's more stringent. Therefore, I can understand that his daughter-in-law is asur. But tomar behi, why would we think to apply that to your wife's side? Sheima b'sreifa, where her mother is only sreifa. Ve'oda more so, ma'hu chalaktabo bein bito l'chalaso. For his side, there's a distinction between his daughter and his daughter-in-law. His daughter is B'Sreifa, his daughter-in-law is B'Skila. Apitach Lokba, so I should say also on your wife's side, there should be a difference between her daughter, which is B'Sreifa, Lichalasa, and her daughter-in-law, and yet we're saying that both your wife's daughter and your wife's daughter-in-law are B'Sreifa. And even if you say that Sreifa is more Chomer than Skila, but still, and still this question, this consistency question, remains, right? That your daughter, that his daughter and daughter-in-law have different punishments. So therefore, his wife's daughter and daughter-in-law should also have different punishments. So therefore, we can't. That just doesn't get off the ground. There's too many questions, and therefore, your wife's daughter-in-law would not be asur. Whew. Well, that was the first daf of the 9th parak of Masechta Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Hey, Masechta Sanhedrin. We started learning Eiluin and Nisrafin, and we got straight into Yevamis. Peace out.